The biting chill in the Bushwick alley clung to Ethan Albright's sweat-dampened suit, a stark contrast to the oppressive heat of the contentious board meeting he had just fled. His breath, ragged and sharp, plumed into the frigid air, mirroring the chaotic beat of his heart. One hand, still clenched, held a black balaclava, damp with sweat and the grime of the concrete. His other, calloused from years of discreet self-defense training, pressed against a throbbing cut above his eye, yet he felt no pain. Only a searing, disorienting shock had frozen him in place, rendering him immobile amidst the refuse and forgotten promises. Below him, sprawled on the wet, trash-strewn ground amidst discarded pizza boxes and overflowing dumpsters, was the thief. The figure, moments ago a blur of black and fury, was now undeniably clear. The balaclava, ripped from their head in a desperate final struggle, lay crumpled near a discarded soda can. It had revealed a face, a woman's face, not just any woman. Her dark hair fanned out on the grimy pavement, dark eyes, fierce and unyielding despite the blossoming bruise on her cheekbone, stared up at him, reflecting the solitary, flickering alley light. The recognition hit him like a physical blow, colder and more paralyzing than the late autumn air. It was Clara Ramirez, a name he hadn't spoken, hadn't even truly thought of, in well over a decade. A ghost from his company's past, now bruised and breathless at his feet. A stark, impossible bridge between his world of pristine glass towers and her world of shadowed alleys had just violently collapsed. The wail of a distant police siren began to pierce the urban cacophony, a shrill alarm jolting them both back to the harsh reality, adding a layer of imminent threat to the already volatile tableau. If you've ever had a past memory ambush you, shattering everything you thought you knew, leave a like and share your story in the comments. But to truly understand how Ethan Albright, a titan of the tech world, found himself wrestling a ghost from his past in a dimly lit Brooklyn alley, we must rewind 12 years. And then we must understand the very specific, very immediate crisis that drove him into that alley in the first place. Ethan Albright, a man whose life was meticulously ordered, whose every decision was a calculated move in the vast, intricate game of global technology, found his carefully constructed world splintering. The raw, primal shock of seeing Clara Ramirez, the thief who had just fought him with an intensity that belied her slender frame, was a rupture in his reality. He knew her, or at least a younger version of her, a ghost from a past he had consciously buried under layers of corporate triumphs and burgeoning net worth. A ghost who was now an avenging angel, bruised and defiant, lying at his feet in the grime and shadows of a forgotten alley. Just hours earlier, he had been cloistered in a sterile boardroom, the polished mahogany table reflecting the furrowed brows of his senior executives like distorted masks. The air, thick with unspoken accusations and veiled anxieties, hummed with the weight of Zenith Innovation's latest, most devastating crisis. A public health scandal, vast and growing. Thousands of patients, users of Zenith's flagship neural interface medical device, were experiencing debilitating neurological side effects. The symptoms were varied but terrifyingly consistent. Persistent sleep disturbances, a creeping cognitive fog that stole memories and clarity, uncontrollable tremors, and in severe cases, even localized paralysis. The initial reports had been dismissed as anecdotal, then coincidental, and now undeniably systemic. Zenith, his empire, the very pulse of global data, was under siege, its reputation, carefully cultivated over decades, bleeding out onto the pages of every major newspaper. The board meeting had been a bloodbath of blame-shifting and damage control strategies, each more expensive, more legally convoluted, and more morally dubious than the last. Ethan, usually unshakable, had felt a cold dread begin to creep in, a feeling he had initially attributed to the sheer magnitude of the impending lawsuits and the catastrophic financial fallout. But beneath that, a deeper, more unsettling unease had begun to stir, a whisper of something fundamentally wrong. He had needed a moment, a breath of cold, honest air, away from the suffocating corporate pretense and the relentless pressure to spin a narrative. That's why he'd eschewed his usual motorcade route, opting instead for a brisk walk through Bushwick's labyrinthine streets, seeking a moment of anonymity, a fleeting attempt to ground himself before stepping into his waiting armored vehicle. Instead, he'd been thrown into a confrontation that shattered his carefully maintained emotional distance and ripped open a wound in time. The memory of a bright-eyed intern, perhaps 22 years old, with an earnest intensity that stood out amongst the more jaded corporate faces, flickered through his mind. Clara Ramirez. She had been a bioengineer in training, following her brilliant father, Dr. Alejandro Ramirez, through the hallowed halls of his nascent company, Neuralink. Neuralink, a visionary startup, promised to revolutionize neural technology, offering hope for patients suffering from neurological disorders. It was a jewel in the crown of biomedical innovation, a beacon of scientific integrity. Dr. Ramirez had been a man of almost quixotic ideals, a brilliant mind utterly devoted to ethical innovation, believing technology should serve humanity, not profit. His neural interface research had been groundbreaking, designed with meticulous fail-safes and robust safety protocols, intended to ensure absolute patient well-being, even if it meant slower development. He believed that the human brain, with all its intricate fragility, deserved nothing less than perfection, but his integrity, Ethan now realized with a sickening lurch, had also been his downfall in an industry that prioritized speed and scale above all else. Zenith, then under the aggressive leadership of Ethan's late father, Benjamin Albright, had acquired Neuralink in what was subtly termed a hostile takeover a little over 12 years ago. Ethan, still finding his footing in the executive hierarchy, had observed from a distance, absorbed in his own nascent projects, dimly aware of the whispers. Dr. Ramirez, the whispers went, had been uncooperative, resistant to market pressures, and too idealistic. Terms that, in the cutthroat world of tech, often meant impeding profit and standing in the way of progress. The official story spun by Zenith's PR machine was that Dr. Ramirez had been generously bought out, his genius absorbed into the larger Zenith machine for the greater good of humanity. What followed, however, was a rapid and aggressive redesign of his core technology. Timelines were drastically accelerated. Safety protocols were reportedly streamlined to meet impossible deadlines, and as Ethan dimly recalled from fleeting mentions in old project briefings, certain modifications were made to Dr. Ramirez's original untainted research. The market demanded speed, and Zenith delivered, releasing a compromised version of the neural interface technology, rushing it to market under the guise of revolutionary progress. The consequences, unforeseen or perhaps deliberately ignored by the architects of that swift acquisition, were now manifesting as the debilitating side effects plaguing thousands of innocent users, a dark testament to unchecked ambition. Dr. Alejandro Ramirez, his life's work twisted and exploited, his name publicly tarnished by implications of shoddy science, had died a broken man within months of the takeover, his vision desecrated, his spirit crushed. Clara, too, was an unspoken casualty of that hostile takeover. Her promising career, once fueled by the boundless ambition of a young scientist eager to follow in her father's footsteps, had been summarily derailed. The scandal, the public outcry over a device that was supposed to heal now causing widespread harm, had touched her personally, profoundly. The world had seen her father as a failure, a reckless visionary whose unproven technology had caused widespread suffering. But Clara knew the truth, a truth buried deep within the corporate archives of Zenith, a truth she had spent over a decade meticulously researching and gathering evidence for. Her father's designs were sound. It was Zenith's deliberate alterations, made for quicker profits and market dominance, that had caused the public health catastrophe now threatening to unravel Ethan's empire. Her objective that night in the alley was not mere theft. It was a desperate, burning quest for vindication. It was a dangerous, high-stakes gamble to clear her father's name, to resurrect his stolen legacy, and to expose the brutal truth behind Zenith's ruthlessness, even if it meant risking everything. The precious data drive, no bigger than her thumb, now clutched tightly in her hand as she scrambled away into the shadows, held what she believed to be her late father's original neural interface research, untainted by Zenith's corrupting touch, the irrefutable proof of his innocence and their guilt. Ethan watched her go, a fleeting shadow disappearing into the labyrinthine streets of Brooklyn, her agile form melting into the darkness. The police siren was closer now, a harsh, insistent reminder of his precarious public position. He should have called them. He should have held her. He should have ensured the thief was apprehended. But he couldn't. His carefully constructed composure had shattered the moment he saw her face, replaced by a torrent of conflicting emotions. Shock, confusion, a creeping guilt, and a nascent, terrifying understanding. The idea that this woman, Clara Ramirez, was driven by a deep-seated injustice, a corporate wrong that had festered for 12 years, shook his detached worldview to its core. The whispers from the past, the uncooperative nature of her father, now resonated with a chilling new meaning, echoing with a foreboding implication. He had always believed in Zenith, in the relentless pursuit of innovation, in the inherent goodness and ethical integrity of his father's vision. But what if that vision had been corrupted, twisted into something monstrous? What if the very foundations of his empire were built on a lie, a betrayal that had destroyed a brilliant man and now harmed thousands? The questions gnawed at him, sharp and relentless, each one a hammer blow against the walls of his carefully constructed reality. His head of security, Marcus Thorne, a man whose calm demeanor belied his past as an FBI agent and who was fiercely loyal to Ethan, would expect a full report. He would expect Ethan to press charges immediately, to deploy all of Zenith's formidable legal resources against this masked assailant. And Veronica Hayes, Zenith's chief legal counsel, a woman whose ambition was matched only by her ruthless efficiency and whose legal strategies bordered on predatory, had already advised him to do precisely that. "Paint her as a disgruntled former employee seeking to extort the company, Mr. Albright," she'd said just last week, anticipating precisely this kind of scenario, though never expecting him to be directly involved in the physical confrontation. It's boilerplate. We crush these kinds of challenges before they gain any traction, before they pollute the public discourse with baseless accusations. But Ethan's intuition, a primal instinct he'd learned to trust over years of navigating high-stakes corporate warfare, told him that there was far more to Clara's story than mere criminal intent. He felt a profound, unsettling certainty that he had just glimpsed the raw edge of a truth he had unknowingly inherited, a legacy of deceit that now threatened to consume him. He stood in the alley for a long, cold moment, the cold seeping into his bones, the stench of garbage and desperation filling his nostrils. The police cruisers, lights flashing a garish, intrusive red and blue, finally screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth, their presence a harsh intrusion into his private moment of epiphany. Ethan knew he had to act, to present a calm, controlled facade, to articulate a plausible, sanitized version of events. But inside, a silent, internal investigation had already begun, spurred by the defiance in Clara's dark eyes. He would task Marcus, despite Veronica's almost certain objections and potential obstruction, with a full confidential dive into Clara Ramirez and her father's past, unearthing every buried detail. He would start poring over Zenith's old acquisition documents himself, files that had long been buried in dusty archives, ignored in the relentless march of progress, hoping to find answers, dreading what he might uncover. A growing sense of dread, cold and inevitable, began to settle in his gut, replacing the shock with a steely resolve. He knew with a certainty that chilled him more than the autumn air that the answers he sought might shake Zenith Innovations and his own identity to their very foundations. The encounter in the alley was not just a robbery, it was a reckoning, a moment that would forever redefine his past, present, and future. He had glimpsed a raw, unvarnished truth, and he knew with a chilling clarity that there was no turning back. The fight in the alley had exposed more than just a masked thief. It had exposed the fragile facade of his own carefully constructed world, revealing the dark, forgotten foundations upon which his empire truly stood. The world blurred around Clara as she scrambled away, the police sirens drawing closer with each frantic stride. The raw asphalt scraped against her palms as she pushed herself up, adrenaline momentarily dulling the searing pain in her side and the throbbing ache where Ethan Albright's fist had connected with her cheekbone. The balaclava, a symbol of her anonymity and a thin veil of protection, was gone. Her dark hair, once neatly tied back, now streamed wildly, tangling with the cold sweat beading on her forehead. The alley's grime clung to her skin, a physical manifestation of the desperation that fueled her every desperate breath. But she didn't care. Her fingers, trembling slightly, clutched the precious data drive, a tiny, innocuous device that felt heavier than any weapon. It was proof. It was vindication. It was her father's legacy. She moved with the practiced ease of someone who knew these forgotten streets, a shadow melting into deeper shadows. Bushwick's labyrinthine alleys, usually a canvas of vibrant graffiti and hushed secrets, were now a treacherous obstacle course. She vaulted over overflowing dumpsters, slid through narrow gaps between buildings, her heart hammering against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the relentless pursuit. The thought of Ethan Albright's face, etched with a shock that mirrored her own recognition, spurred her on. He had known her. The billionaire, the tech titan, the very man whose company had consumed her father's lifework, had recognized the woman beneath the mask. The impossible confluence of their worlds, a collision in a forgotten alley, added a terrifying new dimension to her already high-stakes mission. She had seen the flicker of something in his eyes. Confusion, yes, but also a flicker of something unsettlingly personal, a shadow of recognition that went beyond a mere face in Zenith's old employee files. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she emerged from the maze of alleys onto a bustling thoroughfare. The anonymity of the crowd, a welcome shield. She hailed a cab, her voice hoarse, barely managing to articulate her destination. A cramped walk-up apartment in the Bronx, her sanctuary, her command center. The ride was a blur of flashing city lights and her own racing thoughts. Every bump in the road, every sudden break, sent a jolt of anxiety through her. She kept her hand protectively over the data drive, a precious relic in a world that had tried to bury its truth. Her apartment, a single room cluttered with scientific journals, old textbooks, and the remnants of countless late-night coding sessions, was a stark contrast to the opulence of Ethan's Manhattan penthouse, glimpsed only in magazines and news reports. Her life was a testament to struggle and unwavering purpose. She worked multiple odd jobs, tutoring pre-med students, late-night coding for obscure startups, even waitressing on weekends, all to fund her relentless pursuit of the truth. Every spare dollar squirreled away for equipment, for encrypted servers, for the silent war she waged against a corporate behemoth. The moment she was inside, the door locked and bolted, the city's cacophony muted to a distant hum. She sank onto her worn couch, finally allowing herself to truly feel the pain. The bruise on her cheek was already a dark purple, a testament to the unexpected ferocity of Ethan Albright. She had underestimated him, the billionaire with surprisingly capable hands. She touched the swelling, a grim smile playing on her lips. He had underestimated her too. Her first call was to Dr. Lena Petrova, an old mentor from Columbia University, a woman whose brilliant mind was only surpassed by her quiet courage. Lena, a respected professor of biomedical ethics, had been a close colleague and confidant of Clara's father. She was one of the few who still believed in Alejandro Ramirez's integrity, risking her own career to discreetly offer Clara a safe space and resources, access to university networks, specialized software, and most importantly, her own unparalleled expertise in cracking complex encryptions. "It's done, Lena," Clara whispered into the phone, her voice thick with exhaustion and triumph. "I have it." A relieved sigh echoed through the line. "Thank God, Clara. Are you safe? Did anyone see you?" "Albright," Clara admitted, her voice tightening. "He was there, he recognized me, but I got away and I have the drive." Silence. Lena's voice, when it came again, was laced with concern. "Albright? Ethan Albright? That complicates things, my dear. He's not his father. He's a different kind of beast. But it also means he knows." "He knows nothing," Clara retorted, a fierce determination hardening her tone. "He saw a thief. He saw a woman he might have known years ago. He doesn't know why. Not yet." "Then we work faster," Lena replied, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Bring it to me tomorrow early. My lab is secure. We'll crack this thing wide open, and then we expose them, Clara. For Alejandro, for everyone they've hurt. If you've ever felt the burning need to uncover a hidden truth, even when the odds are stacked against you, hit that like button and share your experience in the comments below. Meanwhile, a world away in Manhattan, Ethan Albright's usually unshakable demeanor was fractured. He had given a terse, carefully sanitized account to the arriving NYPD officers. A lone assailant, masked, attempted robbery. He fought back. The thief fled. No personal belongings taken, just a scuffle. He'd downplayed his own injuries, the torn suit, the raw shock. His security detail, always a vigilant but discreet presence, quickly ushered him into his armored sedan, whisking him away from the scene, away from the prying questions. The ride back to his penthouse was a blur. The pristine leather interior, usually a cocoon of calm, felt suffocating. He watched the city lights flash by, each one a stark, indifferent eye, and felt a profound sense of dislocation. The stench of stale garbage from the alley seemed to cling to his expensive suit, a phantom odor polluting the rarefied air of his world. The moment he was inside his sprawling, minimalist penthouse, high above the silent, glittering city, he went straight to his private study. His hands, still trembling slightly, stripped off the torn suit jacket, then the tie. The white dress shirt, once crisp, was smudged with dirt and a faint smear of blood from the cut above his eye. He ran a hand through his perpetually styled blonde hair, now disheveled and plastered to his forehead with sweat. He called Marcus Thorne, his head of security, immediately. "Marcus, I need you in my study. Now. And this is strictly between us. Not a word to Veronica, not to anyone on the board. Understood?" Ethan's voice was low, taut, betraying the controlled urgency he rarely allowed to surface. Marcus, unflappable as ever, arrived within minutes, his expression a carefully neutral mask. A former FBI agent with a formidable reputation for discretion and effectiveness, Marcus was Ethan's most trusted confidant in the cutthroat world of corporate espionage. He took in Ethan's disheveled appearance, the slight tremor in his hands, and the unusual intensity in his eyes. He didn't need to ask. He simply waited. "I was accosted in an alley in Bushwick tonight," Ethan began, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, as if narrating a distant event, "by a masked individual, a woman. During the struggle, I managed to remove her mask. Her name is Clara Ramirez. She worked at Neuralink, Dr. Alejandro Ramirez's company, years ago before we acquired it. She's a bioengineer." Marcus's eyebrows, usually impassive, twitched almost imperceptibly. The name Clara Ramirez wasn't in any of the immediate security reports about the ongoing medical device crisis. This was new and personal. "I need you to run a full confidential investigation into Clara Ramirez," Ethan continued, his eyes fixed on Marcus. "Every detail, her past, her movements, her current affiliations, and her father, Dr. Alejandro Ramirez. His original research, the circumstances surrounding the Neuralink acquisition, anything that was overlooked or buried. I want everything." "Understood," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. "Any specific leads? Anything she said or implied?" Ethan hesitated. He couldn't tell Marcus about the data drive, about the real target of her theft. That would complicate things, potentially turning Marcus's focus to a standard corporate espionage case, diverting from the deeper, more unsettling truth Ethan suspected. He needed Marcus to investigate the why, not just the what. She was after something from Zenith, clearly, but she didn't elaborate. Her eyes, they held a fierce defiance. Not of a common thief, Marcus, more like someone on a mission. He left out the raw, unyielding pain he'd seen there, the shadow of a personal vendetta. "I'll initiate the deep dive first thing," Marcus assured him, already formulating a plan, his mind a steel trap of information. "I'll use compartmentalized teams. No one will know the full scope or the target." As Marcus left, the room felt emptier, yet heavier. Ethan knew what was coming next. Veronica Hayes, Zenith's chief legal counsel, would be demanding immediate, aggressive action. His phone buzzed, confirming his premonition. "Ethan, what exactly happened tonight?" Veronica's voice, sharp and authoritative, sliced through the phone line. "The preliminary police report is vague, and your security detail is tight-lipped. We need to spin this now. An attempted mugging, perhaps. An unfortunate incident with a disgruntled former employee seeking to extort the company is our strongest play. We need to press charges immediately against this Clara Ramirez and control the narrative." Ethan closed his eyes, picturing Clara's bruised but defiant face. "No, Veronica, not yet. I handled it. There will be no charges filed at this time." "No charges?" Veronica's voice rose, betraying a rare flicker of exasperation. "Ethan, this is unprecedented. Someone broke into a secure Zenith facility, or attempted to, and then physically assaulted you. We cannot appear weak. This could set a dangerous precedent, especially with the ongoing crisis regarding the neural interface device. We need to show strength, to shut down any potential narrative that we're vulnerable, or, worse, that we have something to hide." "I understand the optics, Veronica," Ethan replied, his voice firm, unwavering. "But my intuition tells me there's more to this. I need time. Marcus is investigating privately. For now you will release a statement that the matter has been resolved internally and no charges are being pressed at my personal discretion. That's an order." Veronica, after a tense silence, conceded, her frustration thinly veiled. "Very well, Ethan, but I must strongly advise against this. It leaves us exposed." Ethan hung up, rubbing his temples. He knew she was right, from a purely corporate perspective, but something fundamental had shifted within him in that alley. The dispassionate CEO, the cold strategist, had been shaken by a personal connection to a past injustice he now feared was woven into the fabric of his empire. He couldn't simply dismiss Clara Ramirez as a criminal. Her eyes had told a different story, a story of pain and profound conviction. He turned to his computer, accessing Zenith's sprawling internal archives, the old Neuralink acquisition documents, files that had been buried under layers of more pressing projects, forgotten in the relentless churn of innovation. He started poring over them, hour after agonizing hour, the blue light of the screen illuminating his increasingly grim expression. He found the official reports, a swift, aggressive acquisition, an official narrative of Dr. Alejandro Ramirez's generous buyout. But then he began to uncover the discrepancies, the subtle red flags that had been overlooked or perhaps deliberately obscured. Hurried approvals for design changes post-acquisition, bypassing standard safety protocols, references to accelerated timelines and market pressure, justifying modifications to Dr. Ramirez's meticulously developed, slower-to-market designs. He cross-referenced these with early R&D reports, noting the increasing frequency of internal concerns about untested alterations and potential long-term neurological impacts that had been flagged and then, mysteriously, silenced. The cold dread that had begun to creep in during the board meeting now solidified into a chilling certainty. It wasn't just a crisis of his device, it was a crisis of conscience. His father, Benjamin Albright, had been a co-founder of Zenith, a visionary, yes, but also a ruthless pragmatist. Had he been aware? Had he sanctioned these changes, these shortcuts that prioritized profit over patient safety? The idea was a corrosive acid, eating away at the legacy he had inherited, the legacy he had spent his life building upon. He remembered his father as a man of integrity, driven by a desire to push the boundaries of technology for human benefit. But the documents he now held, filled with bureaucratic jargon and hurried sign-offs, painted a different, darker picture. The night wore on, the city outside his window slowly fading from a glittering tapestry to the grey pre-dawn light. Ethan, usually immune to fatigue, felt the exhaustion deep in his bones, but he couldn't stop. Each document he reviewed, each discrepancy he unearthed, pulled him deeper into the labyrinth of Zenith's past, unearthing not just corporate malfeasance, but a deeply personal betrayal. The confrontation in the alley had not merely been an attack, it had been a desperate cry for justice, echoing across 12 years, shattering his illusions and forcing him to confront a truth far more devastating than any financial scandal. He knew now with a gut-wrenching certainty that the public health crisis was merely the symptom of a much deeper, much older wound. And the woman who had fought him in the alley, Clara Ramirez, was not just a thief. She was the living embodiment of that wound, a testament to the price of unchecked ambition and the relentless, undeniable power of a truth seeking to be set free. The very foundations of his empire, once thought immutable, now felt precarious, built on shifting sands of deceit and silence. He had to uncover the full story, no matter the cost, no matter what it revealed about the company he led or the father he revered. The journey had just begun, and its true destination remained terrifyingly unknown. The cold, sterile glow of Lena Petrova's lab at Columbia University felt miles away from the grimy alley, yet the air crackled with a similar intensity. Clara, despite her bruised cheek and the weariness dragging at her limbs, felt a surge of renewed purpose as she handed the data drive to Lena. The drive, a tiny, innocuous flash of metal, held the potential to unravel an empire and clear her father's name. Lena, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, took it with a reverence usually reserved for ancient artifacts. "This is it, Clara," Lena murmured, her voice hushed with the weight of the moment. Alejandro's legacy, his final stand. The lab, usually bustling with grad students, was eerily quiet in the pre-dawn hours, a silent testament to the clandestine nature of their mission. Lena, a formidable bioengineer and cryptographer in her own right, immediately set to work, her nimble fingers flying across the keyboard, a cascade of complex code filling the holographic displays. Clara watched, a silent sentinel, her heart a drumbeat of anticipation and fear. Every line of code, every whir of the server, felt like a breath held. The encryption, as expected, was formidable, a multi-layered fortress built by Zenith's top security architects. But Lena was no ordinary hacker. She understood the nuances of neural interface data structures, the specific signatures of Alejandro's original work, and the likely vulnerabilities introduced by Zenith's rushed modifications. Hours bled into one another, fueled by strong coffee and a shared unspoken determination. The first fragments began to decrypt, flickering onto the screen in disjointed segments. Clara leaned closer, her eyes scanning the familiar patterns, the elegant algorithms that bore her father's indelible mark. A chilling picture began to emerge. The partially decoded files confirmed her father's original, more robust and significantly safer neural interface designs. It was all there. The redundancy protocols, the advanced biofeedback loops, the adaptive fail-safes designed to prevent precisely the kind of neurological degradation now plaguing Zenith's users. And then the glaring discrepancies. Lines of code, clearly inserted by Zenith that bypassed these critical safety measures, prioritizing data transfer speed and processing power over patient well-being. A specific aggressive optimization strategy was evident, a clear directive to strip away any element that might slow down market release, even if it meant compromising the very integrity of the device. It became terrifyingly clear that Zenith had indeed intentionally modified her father's designs, prioritizing speed to market over patient safety, leading directly to the widespread neurological issues now plaguing users of Zenith's flagship medical device. "They didn't just alter it, Clara," Lena whispered, her voice laced with a cold fury. "They eviscerated it. They took out every safety net, every safeguard Alejandro meticulously built in. For profit. For speed." Clara felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was worse than she had imagined. Her father hadn't just been wronged, his life's work had been weaponized against the very people it was meant to help. The public health crisis, a tragedy Ethan Albright was now desperately trying to contain, was a direct, irrefutable consequence of Zenith's greed. Then Lena paused, her eyes widening. "Wait, there's something else. A hidden layer, a coded message, embedded deep within the metadata, disguised as a corrupted timestamp." She worked frantically, her fingers flying, and a new file materialized. It was a message from her father, brief and cryptic, but undeniably his. The text appeared, pixelated and urgent. "Clara, if you're reading this, they've compromised everything. The original designs, not just software, hardware. There's an uncorrupted physical backup. Old warehouse, Long Island City, Queens. Below the Ramirez Innovation sign. Coordinates attached. Find it. Expose them. For truth. For us." Followed by a string of geographical coordinates. Clara's breath hitched. A physical backup. That meant absolute, irrefutable proof, untainted by digital manipulation. Not just software, but the actual physical blueprints, the prototypes, the uncorrupted hardware designs. A final, desperate act of defiance from her father, hiding his true legacy where he hoped it would one day be found. The coordinates led to an abandoned warehouse, a forgotten relic in Long Island City, Queens, a place that held the key to unlocking the full scope of Zenith's deception. If you've ever felt a truth buried deep down, waiting to be discovered, then you know this feeling. Give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments. While Clara and Lena raced against the clock, Ethan Albright found himself descending deeper into the rabbit hole of Zenith's past. His office, usually a pristine testament to modern efficiency, was now littered with yellowed documents, dusty ledgers, and encrypted internal servers from a decade prior. Marcus Thorne, true to his word, had initiated a discreet but thorough investigation. His reports, delivered in hushed tones behind closed doors, painted an increasingly damning picture. "Clara Ramirez has been living a quiet life," Marcus reported, his voice low. "Multiple odd jobs, tutoring, freelance coding. No lavish spending, no signs of a criminal network. Her finances point to a relentless, almost obsessive pursuit of resources for something. Her connections are clean, mostly academics, some former Neuralink employees who were also pushed out. Her father, Dr. Alejandro Ramirez, was indeed marginalized after the acquisition. Public records show a swift decline in his health and reputation. Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. It confirmed his chilling intuition. Clara wasn't a common thief. She was a woman driven by profound injustice, her life consumed by a singular, desperate mission. Simultaneously, Ethan's own deep dive into the archives unearthed a paper trail of corporate deceit that made his blood run cold. He discovered internal emails from 12 years ago, before his direct leadership, from a former R&D executive named Roger Sterling, who was still serving as a senior advisor to Zenith's board. These emails revealed a shocking pattern, crucial safety test results, showing early signs of adverse neurological reactions to the modified device had been deliberately suppressed. Sterling, then a rising star in R&D, had issued directives to re-evaluate and contextualize these findings, effectively burying them. There were thinly veiled threats to scientists who raised concerns, warnings about corporate loyalty and the integrity of the brand. But the most devastating discovery came from an unexpected source. Driven by a vague, unsettling memory of his father's study, a room he rarely entered since Benjamin Albright's death, Ethan had begun to systematically search it. Tucked away in a dusty old safe, hidden behind a loose panel in the mahogany shelves, he found it. A deeply personal, handwritten letter from Dr. Alejandro Ramirez himself. It was addressed to Ethan's late father, Benjamin Albright, a co-founder of Zenith, who had tragically died a few months after the Neuralink acquisition from what was publicly attributed to a sudden, massive heart attack. The letter, dated just weeks before Alejandro's death, was a desperate, heartbreaking plea. "Benjamin, I implore you, listen to me. They are destroying my life's work. The modifications to the neural interface are reckless, dangerous. I have evidence of suppressed safety data, of deliberate alterations to prioritize profit over patient well-being. They will hurt people, Benjamin, thousands. I have confronted Sterling, but he is unwavering. Your company, the company we both built, is being corrupted from within. I beg you, use your influence, expose the truth, clear my name before it's too late, before innocent lives are ruined." Ethan read it once, then again, his hands trembling, the weight of the paper feeling like lead. A cold metallic taste filled his mouth. His father, Benjamin Albright, had known, or at least he had been told. The letter, found tucked away in a safe, suggested Benjamin Albright might have been aware of the cover-up, or even complicit. Why else would he have hidden it? Why had he not acted? The questions clawed at Ethan, a sickening realization blooming in his chest. His father, the man he had revered, the man whose legacy he had tirelessly worked to uphold, might have been complicit in this monstrous deception, or perhaps he had tried to act and paid the ultimate price. The tragic heart attack, coming so soon after the acquisition and this desperate letter, now loomed with a chilling new implication. The evidence was overwhelming, weaving a tapestry of corporate deceit that implicated Zenith's very foundation. The suppressed data, Roger Sterling's clear culpability, and now his own father's potential involvement, or silence. The public health crisis was no longer just a legal liability. It was a moral catastrophe, a personal betrayal that stretched across decades, touching his own family. Ethan felt a strange duality. On one hand, a profound sense of anguish and betrayal, the image of his father tarnished. On the other, a fierce, almost liberating clarity. He finally understood Clara Ramirez. Her anger, her defiance, her desperate mission, it was all justified. He was no longer just the CEO fighting a crisis. He was a man uncovering a devastating truth, a truth that demanded action, regardless of the personal or corporate cost. He knew what he had to do, even if it meant tearing down the very empire he had inherited. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. A high-stakes gathering convened to address the deepening public health scandal. Veronica Hayes would be there, armed with her legal arsenal, ready to deflect and defend. Roger Sterling, his face etched with the weariness of years, would also be present, still a senior advisor, still a powerful voice. But Ethan would arrive armed with his own arsenal, a collection of documents, emails, and a single heartbreaking letter that would expose the rot at Zenith's core. As the morning light streamed through his penthouse windows, Ethan felt a grim resolve settle over him. The battle for Zenith's future and for his own soul was about to begin. He knew the fight would be brutal, the fallout catastrophic, but he also knew with absolute certainty that he could no longer stand by. Clara Ramirez had forced him to look into the darkness, and now he had to bring the truth to light, no matter what it cost him. The alley had been more than a physical confrontation. It had been an awakening, a violent and irreversible shift in his perception of reality. The empire he had inherited was built on lies, and now he would be the one to dismantle them. His father's silence or his complicity remained a haunting question, but Clara's father's plea, his words echoing across time, demanded justice. And Ethan Albright, the billionaire, was now irrevocably bound to that quest. The mahogany boardroom, usually a bastion of corporate calm, felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken tension. Ethan Albright, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, stood at the head of the long table, a stark contrast to his disheveled appearance just 2 nights prior. But beneath the polished facade, a storm raged. Veronica Hayes, Zenith's chief legal counsel, sat opposite him, her expression a predatory blend of cautious optimism and thinly veiled defiance, ready to launch into a pre-rehearsed defense. Roger Sterling, his face a mask of practiced indifference, slouched in his chair, seemingly oblivious to the seismic shift about to occur. The other board members, a collection of powerful investors and seasoned executives, shifted nervously, their iPads displaying the latest, increasingly dire news headlines about the neural interface scandal. They expected damage control, a strategic retreat, a public scapegoat. They were about to receive an unvarnished truth. "Gentlemen, Veronica, thank you for attending," Ethan began, his voice calm, steady, yet imbued with an authority that silenced the room. "We are here to address the ongoing public health crisis regarding our neural interface device. I've spent the last 48 hours conducting an internal investigation prompted by an unexpected development. What I've uncovered is far more disturbing than a simple manufacturing defect or a design flaw." He paused, letting the words hang in the air, creating a palpable tension. Veronica's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift in narrative, the departure from their agreed-upon strategy. Sterling, however, merely sniffed, an impatient gesture. Ethan pressed a button on a remote, and the large screen behind him, usually reserved for quarterly reports and market projections, flared to life, displaying a series of internal emails. "These are dated 12 years ago, shortly after the acquisition of Neuralink. They are from Mr. Roger Sterling, then our head of R&D. Sterling stiffened, a flicker of something akin to panic crossing his face, quickly masked by a scowl. Veronica shot him a sharp, warning glance. "These emails," Ethan continued, his voice gaining an icy edge, "reveal a deliberate suppression of crucial safety test results. Findings that clearly indicated adverse neurological reactions to the modified neural interface design. Mr. Sterling, you issued directives to re-evaluate and contextualize these findings, effectively burying them to accelerate the device's market release." He pointed to a specific email highlighted in red. "Priority is market penetration. Any data impeding this will be recontextualized. Integrity of the brand must be maintained above all else. Roger Sterling, head of R&D." The boardroom erupted in murmurs. Sterling blanched, his composure cracking. "Ethan, this is preposterous. Those were standard internal discussions, part of a dynamic R&D process. Recontextualization means refining the data, not suppressing it." "Refining the data, Mr. Sterling," Ethan retorted, his eyes burning with controlled fury, "to ignore warnings that thousands of patients are now suffering from. This isn't a dynamic R&D process. It's corporate negligence bordering on criminal malfeasance." Veronica, ever the strategist, tried to intervene. "Ethan, these are historical documents. We need to focus on current mitigation strategies. We can address past procedural issues later. We have a public relations crisis on our hands." "We have a moral crisis, Veronica," Ethan countered, his gaze sweeping across the stunned faces of the board members. "And it started 12 years ago. But that's not all." He pressed the remote again, and the screen transitioned, displaying a scanned image of a handwritten letter, aged and fragile. "This is a letter from Dr. Alejandro Ramirez, dated just weeks before his death, addressed to my late father, Benjamin Albright." A collective gasp swept through the room. The implication was clear. The architect of Zenith's original success, Benjamin Albright, might have been aware of the cover-up, or worse. The atmosphere crackled, thick with a profound silence. "In this letter," Ethan narrated, his voice now tinged with a raw, personal pain, "Dr. Ramirez pleads with my father to expose the truth about the compromised designs, the suppressed data, the reckless modifications that would inevitably harm patients. He begs my father to clear his name. This letter was found in my father's private safe, hidden." Veronica rose, her face pale. "Ethan, you cannot present unverified personal correspondence in this forum. This is speculative, an emotional distraction. We have no way of knowing if your father even received this, or why it was in his safe." "My father died a few months after this letter was written," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a chilling whisper. "Publicly, from a heart attack. Privately, I now have to wonder." He looked directly at Roger Sterling. "Did my father ever act on this, Roger? Did he confront you?" Sterling, cornered, his usual swagger completely gone, finally broke. He had his concerns. He discussed it. But the market, the investors, they were pushing for the release. It was a different era, Ethan. Speed was everything. We couldn't afford to be seen as hesitant. His voice was a weak, pathetic whimper compared to the booming authority he once commanded. At that moment, the boardroom door opened and Marcus Thorne stepped in, his presence commanding, his expression grave. "Mr. Albright, I can corroborate these findings. My confidential investigation into Dr. Ramirez's initial designs and the subsequent alterations has confirmed the intentional suppression of safety data and the aggressive re-engineering of the device. My own suspicions, expressed internally years ago, were forcefully suppressed by previous management, including Mr. Sterling under threat of termination." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Shouts, accusations, the frantic ringing of phones. Sterling slumped in his chair, defeated. Veronica Hayes, ever the professional, stared at Ethan, a new, unsettling respect in her eyes, mingled with a professional horror. He had just detonated a bomb at the heart of Zenith. If your heart is racing as fast as ours, imagining this moment of truth, hit the like button and share this story with someone who needs to see how justice can prevail. While chaos reigned in Zenith's boardroom, Clara Ramirez was racing against time. The coordinates from her father's hidden message led to a forgotten corner of Long Island City, Queens, a desolate stretch of abandoned warehouses, their brick facades crumbling, windows boarded up, ghosts of a forgotten industrial past. The air was thick with the smell of salt water from the East River and the quiet hum of distant traffic. The specific warehouse, faded and scarred by years of neglect, had a barely legible, rusted sign above its entrance. "Ramirez Innovations." A cruel irony, she thought, as she pulled up in a borrowed, beat-up sedan. She parked discreetly down the block, her heart thumping against her ribs. The data drive, secured to her wrist, was warm against her skin. This was it. The final, irrefutable proof. The physical backup her father had spoken of. The warehouse door was old, rusted, but remarkably intact, secured with a heavy chain and padlock. Clara, trained by years of quiet observation and practical experience in her father's lab, quickly picked the lock. It clicked open with a soft, mournful sigh, echoing in the cavernous silence. She slipped inside, the vast interior swallowed by an almost total darkness, punctuated only by slivers of moonlight filtering through grimy skylights. Dust motes danced in the faint beams, like tiny, forgotten spirits. The air inside was cold, stale, thick with the scent of decay and forgotten metal. Rows of empty shelving stretched into the darkness, a mausoleum of lost dreams. Her father's message had specified, "Below the Ramirez Innovations" sign. She found a small rusted plaque on the floor, directly beneath where the external sign would have been, almost entirely obscured by a collapsed pallet. She cleared away the debris, revealing a faded etching, a small, almost invisible arrow pointing to a section of the concrete floor. Beneath it, a faint outline of a square panel. With a pry bar she'd brought, she began to work at the edges of the panel, each creak and groan of the metal amplifying the silence, making her feel utterly exposed. She pictured her father, desperate, meticulous, hiding his legacy here, hoping one day someone would find it. Hope was a fragile thing, but it was all she had left. The panel finally gave way with a metallic shriek, revealing a dark, musty cavity below. Inside, carefully wrapped in thick industrial-grade plastic and nestled within a custom-built, hermetically sealed container, were old-school servers, stacks of physical blueprints, and several prototype components, tangible proof of her father's original, untainted neural interface designs. It was magnificent. It was undeniable. It was everything. Just as her fingers brushed against the smooth, cold surface of the server, a sharp crack echoed through the vast space. The warehouse door, which she had carefully resecured, burst inward with a deafening crash. Heavy footsteps pounded on the concrete floor. "Drop it, thief!" a gruff voice commanded. Clara whirled around, her heart lurching into her throat. A Black Ops team, 4 hulking figures in tactical gear, armed with assault rifles, emerged from the shadows. Their movements were swift, precise, clearly professional. Roger Sterling, his face twisted into a snarl, stepped from behind them, a chillingly calm demeanor about him, a small device clutched in his hand. "You really thought you could outsmart me, little girl, after everything I did to bury your father? Amateur." He had clearly anticipated her move, sent his own team to secure the real evidence. Clara knew she was outmatched, 4 against 1. But retreat was not an option. She gripped the pry bar tighter, her eyes burning with a fierce, desperate resolve. "You'll never get it, Sterling." "Oh, I think I will," Sterling sneered, waving his hand. "Apprehend her and secure the merchandise. Make sure nothing is damaged." The lead operative lunged forward, but Clara, fueled by adrenaline and years of frustration, was surprisingly agile. She ducked under his arm, swinging the pry bar in a wide arc, catching him across the chest. He grunted, stumbling back. She knew she couldn't win a direct fight, but she could buy time. Time for what, she didn't know. Her only option was to make it as hard as possible for them. The skirmish was intense, brutal. Clara fought with a desperate ferocity, a blur of motion in the dimly lit warehouse. She was bruised, bleeding, but she refused to yield. Each blow she landed, each dodge, was a testament to her father's legacy, a defiant refusal to let his truth be silenced. Just as 2 of the operatives finally managed to corner her, forcing her to the ground, a new sound pierced the din, the screech of tires outside, followed by heavy footsteps echoing through the warehouse. Suddenly, a figure burst through the shattered main entrance, a blur of expensive suit and furious motion. It was Ethan Albright. He hadn't come to apprehend her. He hadn't come to turn her over to the authorities. He had come to aid her. "Sterling! What the hell is this?" Ethan's voice boomed, carrying across the vast space, cutting through the chaos. He didn't wait for an answer. With a primal roar, he launched himself into the fray, a man transformed from the boardroom titan into a street fighter. He landed a surprising, powerful punch to the jaw of one of Sterling's goons, sending him reeling. Clara, sprawled on the ground, stared at him, stunned. The billionaire, her opponent from the alley, was now fighting beside her. A surprising synergy, born of desperation and shared purpose, emerged between the tech mogul and the bioengineer. Ethan, despite his lack of heavy gear, moved with a controlled aggression, leveraging his larger frame and self-defense training. He kicked, punched, and grappled, protecting Clara as she scrambled to retrieve the server. "Ethan!" Sterling shrieked, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "What are you doing? This woman is a criminal, a thief." "She's after the truth, Sterling," Ethan yelled back, blocking a punch and delivering a devastating knee to an operative's gut. "The truth you buried, the truth you tried to make my father complicit in." In a momentary lull in the intense skirmish, as Ethan pinned one operative against a stack of crates, he turned to Clara, his eyes urgent. He pulled his phone from his pocket, quickly displaying a digital copy of the handwritten letter. "Your father's letter. To mine. He knew. He tried to warn him." Clara's eyes widened, filling with a fresh wave of emotion, shock, grief, a profound sense of understanding. The raw truth of their entwined pasts, of betrayal and a desperate search for justice, cemented their unlikely alliance in that grimy, forgotten warehouse. The dark, cold walls seemed to melt away, replaced by the burning intensity of their shared purpose. They were no longer adversaries. They were partners, united by a legacy of injustice, fighting a common enemy. The true battle, the battle for truth, had just truly begun. The final goon crumpled to the ground, a heavy thud echoing in the vast, still warehouse. Roger Sterling, his face a contorted mask of pure, unadulterated fury and disbelief, stared at Ethan Albright, then at Clara Ramirez, who was now carefully securing the retrieved physical server into a protective casing. "How, you traitor, Albright! You're destroying everything. His voice was a choked rasp, his plans unraveling before his eyes. Ethan, his expensive suit now ruined, his face streaked with dirt and blood, stood protectively over Clara, breathing heavily. "You destroyed it, Sterling, years ago. Now we're simply exposing the truth." He then turned to Clara, his expression a mix of exhaustion and grim determination. "Are you all right? Do you have everything?" Clara nodded, her dark eyes still fierce but now laced with a flicker of something akin to awe meeting his. "I have it. All of it. The uncorrupted data. The physical prototypes." She held up the hardened case. "Thank you. I never expected this." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted, a wry, tired smile touching his lips. The unlikely alliance, forged in the heat of combat amidst the dust and shadows of a forgotten warehouse, felt profoundly right. The fight had cleared the air, stripping away the layers of corporate pretense and personal history, leaving only a shared purpose. Sterling, seeing his opportunity, suddenly lunged for a discarded rifle, but Marcus Thorne, who had been waiting discreetly outside, burst through the now shattered warehouse door, gun drawn. "Drop it, Sterling." Marcus's voice cut through the air, authoritative and chillingly calm. Sterling froze, his eyes wide with terror as he realized the depth of his predicament. Ethan had not come alone. Marcus, his conscience awakened by Ethan's evidence and his own past suppressed suspicions, had not just given an anonymous tip. He had followed his CEO, prepared for whatever might unfold. "Marcus," Ethan said, his voice flat, "ensure Sterling is apprehended. The police will be here shortly. He's to be held for attempted assault, corporate espionage, and obstruction of justice. And make sure every piece of evidence from this warehouse is secured and documented. Everything." Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on Sterling. "Consider it done, Mr. Albright." And then some. As the sirens wailed closer, a harsh, insistent reminder of the world they were about to re-enter, Ethan turned to Clara. "We need to get this evidence to a secure location, somewhere truly safe, before anyone else can try to get their hands on it." Clara, anticipating his thought, pointed to the borrowed sedan. "My car. It's discreet." They moved quickly, efficiently, loading the server case and blueprints into the trunk. The police, led by a stern-faced detective, swarmed the warehouse moments later, finding Sterling and his operatives neatly apprehended by Marcus Thorne. Ethan gave a concise, carefully worded statement, acknowledging the ongoing investigation into Zenith's past practices and confirming the apprehension of individuals involved in a hostile takeover attempt of critical proprietary data. He avoided mentioning Clara directly, giving her the head start she needed to become an advocate, not a criminal. The following week was a blur of frantic, strategic activity. Zenith stock had plummeted immediately after the initial reports of the deepening public health scandal and the whispers of a major internal investigation, but the true storm was yet to break. Ethan, leveraging his unparalleled access and influence, orchestrated an unprecedented press conference at Zenith's glittering Manhattan headquarters. He extended invitations to top journalists, including Sarah Jenkins from the New York Times, whom he had anonymously tipped off days earlier, knowing her reputation for tenacious investigative journalism. The Grand Hall at Zenith's headquarters, usually a venue for product launches and investor briefings, was packed. Cameras flashed, microphones bristled, and the hum of anticipation was almost deafening. Ethan, standing at the podium, looked out at the sea of eager faces, a profound sense of purpose settling over him. He was about to dismantle the legacy he had inherited, to expose the truth, no matter the personal or professional cost. "Good morning," Ethan began, his voice amplified, carrying across the vast room. "I stand before you today not as the CEO of Zenith Innovations, but as a man who has uncovered a deeply unsettling truth about the very foundations of our company. For too long, Zenith has prioritized profit and market dominance over the ethical responsibilities inherent in developing groundbreaking medical technology." A collective gasp swept through the room. This was not the expected corporate spin. This was a confession. 12 years ago, Ethan continued, his voice steady, unwavering, Zenith Innovations acquired Neuralink, a visionary company founded by Dr. Alejandro Ramirez. Dr. Ramirez's original neural interface designs were meticulously crafted with an unwavering commitment to patient safety. However, during the acquisition and subsequent integration, critical safety protocols were deliberately bypassed, and his designs were intentionally modified. These modifications, spearheaded by individuals who prioritized speed to market, led directly to the debilitating neurological side effects now plaguing thousands of our users. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The room was utterly silent, every journalist scribbling furiously, every camera fixed on his face. I confess I initially struggled to believe the extent of this deception, but a thorough internal investigation, which I personally led, has unearthed irrefutable evidence, suppressed safety test results, internal communications revealing a deliberate cover-up, and even a desperate letter from Dr. Clara Ramirez to my late father, Benjamin Albright, pleading for intervention. He took a deep breath. Zenith Innovations admits to past unethical practices. We acknowledge Dr. Clara Ramirez's stolen legacy and the intentional suppression of critical data. As CEO, I take full and complete responsibility for these failures. The hall erupted in a flurry of questions, a cacophony of voices vying for attention. But Ethan raised a hand, silencing them. I am not here merely to confess. I am here to right these wrongs. To my left stands Dr. Clara Ramirez. Clara, no longer a masked thief but a vindicated scientist, stepped forward, a quiet strength radiating from her. The world had known her as a victim, then a fugitive. Now she was an avenging angel of truth. She held the hardened case, the physical server and blueprints, as if it were a sacred relic. Dr. Clara Ramirez, Ethan announced, his voice filled with pride and respect. Dr. Clara Ramirez's daughter has tirelessly pursued the truth for over a decade. She possesses her father's original, untainted research, uncorrupted by Zenith's modifications. This data will now be made public, revealing the true scope of the injustice and offering a clear path forward for ethical neural interface development. Clara, in a voice that was calm but unwavering, began to speak, her words laying bare the intricate details of her father's original safe designs and Zenith's subsequent disastrous alterations. She spoke not with anger, but with a quiet authority, a scientist presenting undeniable facts, vindicating her father's name. The New York Times broke the story within hours, Sarah Jenkins's byline gracing the front page. The headline screamed, "Zenith CEO admits decades of deceit. Billionaire exposes own company's ethical lapses." The tech industry was rocked to its core. Zenith's stock plummeted further. Billions wiped off its valuation in a single day. But Ethan, true to his word, had anticipated this. In the days that followed, Ethan leveraged his personal fortune, pledging a multi-billion-dollar compensation fund for all affected patients, a fund he personally oversaw. He initiated a complete corporate restructuring, tearing down the old hierarchies and rebuilding Zenith from the ground up, with a renewed, uncompromising focus on ethical governance and patient safety. Roger Sterling and Veronica Hayes, along with several other executives implicated in the cover-up, were immediately terminated, facing potential criminal charges. Marcus Thorne, his integrity proven, was promoted to a newly formed, fully independent Ethics and Oversight Board, given unprecedented authority to monitor all future R&D. The most profound change, however, was in the relationship born in that dark alley. During the storm of legal proceedings and corporate upheaval, Ethan and Clara worked tirelessly side by side, a surprising, powerful alliance. They spent countless hours in Zenith's re-established R&D labs, meticulously analyzing the original data, consulting with experts, and devising new ethical frameworks. One quiet evening, in a moment of shared exhaustion and camaraderie, Ethan approached Clara, who was poring over blueprints, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Clara," he said softly, "I want to make you an offer. Zenith is undergoing a complete transformation. I am establishing a new, fully independent ethical research division. It will have autonomous oversight, unlimited resources, and a direct line to the board. I want you to head it, to ensure that such a travesty as your father's will never, ever happen again." Clara looked up, her dark eyes meeting his. The offer wasn't just a job. It was an acknowledgement, a restoration, a profound act of trust. It was an invitation to rebuild, to ensure that her father's stolen legacy would finally, truly, serve humanity as he had intended. "I accept," she said, a small, genuine smile gracing her lips. "But on one condition. We build it with absolute transparency, absolute integrity. No more secrets, no more shortcuts. Agreed, Ethan replied, a sense of lightness in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. No more secrets. The relationship born in that dark alley, forged in combat and bound by a shared quest for justice, transcended its origins. It blossomed into a powerful alliance built on mutual respect and a quiet, profound hope for a future where innovation and integrity could finally coexist. The battle was far from over, with years of legal proceedings and corporate restructuring stretching ahead, but as they faced the future, they did so as partners, no longer isolated by their pasts, but united by a shared, unbreakable purpose. They were two disparate souls, one a billionaire burdened by a tarnished legacy, the other a scientist seeking vindication, brought together by a cruel twist of fate and a desperate fight. Their journey had not been about vengeance, but about truth, and in uncovering it, they had not only redeemed a name, but had also begun to redeem an entire industry, one ethical innovation at a time. The world, through their shared ordeal, had learned that true progress could only be built on a foundation of unshakable integrity, and that even the darkest secrets could not remain buried forever. The bonds that tie us, whether by blood or circumstance, can be our greatest burdens or our most powerful strengths. This story reminds us that sometimes uncovering the truth, no matter how devastating, is the only path to real healing and a future built on honor. What hidden truths are waiting to be uncovered in your own life? Remember to cherish the connections that make us whole and never stop fighting for what is right. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore the depths of human courage and resilience. Together, we can find hope in the face of adversity.